Now, for today's panel, as I do occasionally in these introductions, I cast back this morning to an earlier time in American philanthropy for some sort of far-fetched precedent for the issue before us. In this case, we go back to the year 1914, and we hear this lament from William H. Allen, who at the time was director of New York City's Bureau of Municipal Research, which in his view was far too reliant on the largesse of the Rockefeller Foundation. He complains, "There are things being lauded throughout the world today that every scientific man knows are not true. We don't dare to tell the truth. We all want some of the money. We are all becoming the white slaves of philanthropy," white slavery being a euphemism for prostitution. Of course, nothing of the sort can be said today about the relationship between large foundations and their grantees. Nonetheless, the modern Gates Foundation dominates the landscape of American philanthropy in a way that no single foundation has done probably since the earliest days of the Rockefeller Foundation.
It's difficult sometimes to really wrap our heads around how much bigger Gates is than anything that has preceded it. Often people comment that, well, Gates is nothing compared to the size of the Rockefeller Foundation when it was started, particularly when you compare it to the size of government outlays. I find that a relatively irrelevant comparison because I have not yet met anyone whose professional life in philanthropy started during that era of about 20 years between when Rockefeller started and the income tax vastly expanded the government spending. So we really don't have precedent, any living precedent for what it's really like operating in a civil society with an organization that so exceeds the scope of others of its kind.
A major critique of aid agencies that you are probably very familiar with is that the providers of aid are not accountable to the recipients of aid. There are no natural feedback loops, as there are in business, whereby your customers tell you that they like your product by buying it or not. In the case of a traditional aid agency like USAID, U.S. Congress provides the funding, so the American people have the power to vote them out. And yet it's the people in Afghanistan and Malawi and Uganda who are the ones to say whether they are receiving something of value. With Gates, the accountability problem takes on a slightly different dimension. Even though the foundation has the ability to set agendas in global health like somewhat like a public institution, and even though it gives development assistance on the scale of a medium-sized European power, it is in fact a private foundation accountable only to its four-member board.
In fact, by the way, I'd argue that the Gates Foundation should be very happy that, in fact, it is being talked about. This is in part, I think, a strategy, or it should be, that demonstrates its soft power in the world of policymaking, where it has an undercurrent of influence actually within the dialogue itself. And this soft power is important when looking at this from what I essentially do see it as a political analysis rather than a technological one.
There's been a lot of talk about the work of the foundation, but I want to just back up, and for those of you that are not familiar with all the workings of the foundation, I want to start just by saying how critically important Bill and Melinda's personal belief that all lives, regardless of where they are lived, have equal value. That is central to our mission. It is in our DNA, and it's with this belief that we carry forward a certain implied orientation toward tackling inequities around the world. It's truly deeply ingrained in our organization's DNA, as I said. Now, guided by that fundamental belief, we seek to help all people lead healthy, productive lives. In developing countries, we focus on improving people's health and giving them the choice, giving them the chance to lift themselves out of hunger and extreme poverty. And here in the U.S., as people have mentioned, we seek to ensure that all people, especially those with the fewest resources, have access to the opportunities they need to succeed in school and in life, and that includes a quality public education.